program. Today we're going to talk about how to select the correct size notch trowel for your tiling job. Now, this is a topic which really comes down to personal preference in some respect. There's no actual guide that you can find out there which will tell you exactly what size notch trowel for you to use for a particular size of tile. It comes down to common sense. But what I am going to show you today is how to do a physical assessment to check that you have got an adequate size notch trowel. So we're going to do that after this little talk. Now, first things first, trowel selection is absolutely irrelevant if you haven't done your previous checks anyways. So we know as tilers we do a 4-point check. We make sure the background is clean, dry, sound solid and flat. Yeah, make sure all those bases are covered first and foremost. So clean, make sure there's no contamination, no grease, dust, paint, wallpaper, anything that's going to have any negative effect of the adhesive gripping to the background. Dry, make sure your background's dry. The common one here is plaster, gypsum plaster walls. Obviously if you go into a background that isn't dry, the tiles can debond. Mostly what happens, guys, is you grout discolours over time and you get called back. Okay. Sound solid. You know, the background has to be able to take the weight of the given tile. Remember that one. And on floors they have to be rigid with no bounce. And last but not least, the important one for us is flat. Okay. If the background's nice and flat and within tolerance, then you are going to be able to do that perfect job. Okay, if it's without a tolerance, then really you're going to get what's called lippage. Okay, and the only way you can get around that is by packing adhesive at the back of the tiles, and then we're getting into dodgy fixing practices right there. Okay, so we've covered our checks then, and then next thing we're going to do, we're going to look at the size of the tile that we're working with, and then we're going to assess what best size notch trowel, and we'll go from there. So looking at a typical trowel set that you should have for your jobs, if we look on the far left hand side, we have our first, well, there's 3 trowels here really. There's a spatula trowel, and these are your mosaic trowels, 3 and a 4mm, depending on the size of the mosaics that you're using. So if you're using small mosaics like this, then a 3mm mosaic is absolutely fine. Now be very careful with glass mosaics, okay? Because what can happen is, if you use a 3mm and it doesn't completely spread out on the back, you can see the little lines, right? So a good little tip for you is when you've got a glass mosaic, okay, is to use a 4mm notch mosaic trowel, but once you've notched it, is to turn your flat edge over and very gently flatten out the adhesive, and then when it gets compressed onto the background you will not see the lines. Okay, but if that wasn't a glass mosaic, that typical size, I would go with a 3mm notch trowel, and a good adhesive to select for that would be like a Max Flex Fibre, which used to be called Mosaic Fix, or Bal 1 is another excellent product for that one, guys. If the mosaics are slightly bigger, you know, you can use a 4mm notch mosaic. That's absolutely fine. Then we've got a 6mm notch trowel. Now this is typically used for, you know, smaller tiles, 150 by 150s, 150 by 75s. The smaller tiles basically, guys, yeah, absolutely fine on them. Then you've got an 8mm notch trowel. I tend to use it on something like maybe a 450 by 250 tile, or a 450 by 300, something like that. Typical size like this, yeah. 8mm notch trowel, absolutely fine with that one. Right, guys, the next tile we're going to look at is a 600 by 300. Probably the most common tile that you will work with, very common. And for this one, I will be using a 10mm notch trowel. Now some people will be like, well, I use an 8. Well, that's fine sometimes if your background's mega flat. But what you haven't got with an 8mm trowel on that tile is any sort of movement, any leeway, you know, maybe 1/10 of a mil out and in with your sucker pad. So using a 10 just gives you that extra bit of breathing space, okay? And then we're jumping up to some bigger tiles now. You know, like your 600 by 600s, for example, or we have a even larger tiles, you know, like a 900 by 1200, something like that. That's when you really start looking at your bigger trowels or your combinations as well. So, for instance, a wee while ago I was working with it was an 800 by 600 tiles, a wee bit bigger, and I was using a combination of a 6mm on the back of the tile and an 8 on the wall, okay, and that was giving me a good bed that I was comfortable with, was getting 100% coverage. Okay, so you can do combination of trowels, and we've also heard of what's called back buttering. Okay, now back buttering is where you turn the tile over, sit it on a bucket, and you spread your adhesive with the flat edge of your trowel on the back of the tile, covering the whole of the back. And then obviously your adhesive goes on the wall or on the floor, and then when your tile beds in, it gets much better contact. 100% back buttering is the best contact you will ever get to a tile, and an adhesive, it is 100% the best way. Efficient wise, it obviously takes more time to do, so you have to make that decision if you want to do it. Usually for myself, I'll only do it on tiles that are 600 by 600 upwards. Okay, I'll start looking at that. Another scenario where I might back butter the tile is if the tiles are bored, okay, and if you turn the tiles back to back, you'll see that if the tiles are bored or not. On floor tiles then, you know, once again, you just need to have a wee assessment of the size of the tile and have a think of what size notch you want to use. If I'm using a 600 by 600, then I'll usually use like a 12mm notch. And then you've got these tiger trowels as well, which I'll be honest, I'm not too familiar with, but I'm just hearing great things about them. The contact that you get on the back of the tile is amazing with those. So we talk about getting good coverage on the back of the tile. How do you know you've got good coverage on the back of the tile? It's quite simple. Stick the tile on the wall, prise the tile off, and have a look at the back. There should be no gaps, it should be 100% coverage, and then you are good to go. Same with floors. But let's go and do that now. Alright guys, first things first, make sure you've mixed your adhesive to a good working consistency, or it isn't going to work anyway. Okay. So as we can see guys, the 6mm notch, loads of gaps, massive void in the middle. Not really good enough, is it? 8mm notch, better coverage, still lots of gaps in between the lines. 10mm, better again, still a few little gaps in there. You can actually see by the footprints left by them. And the 12mm, that's done the job, hasn't it, on the floor? That's what you're looking for ideally on floors, guys, yeah? And as you can see on the tile itself, a couple of little gaps in the middle, but mostly covered. So that's interesting, isn't it? Very important, the size notch trowel that you select. And it'll have an impact on how long the job will last. And if it'll last. 10mm notch with a back butter. That's very good contact also. So there we have it guys, trowel selection is very important. Make sure you do those checks next time you're on a job and see what kind of coverage you're getting. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, put some comments in the box if you've got any questions, and let us know what other videos you want to see. Plenty of time on our hands at the moment. Okay, until next time.